My name is Ryan Delargeon. I am the founder and CEO of Grass Riots. Grass Riots is a cool little agency based here in Toronto. Oh, that's even better. Thank you. We're a fully accredited Engaging Networks partner. I'm proud to be. I can't remember the first Engaging Networks conference I attended. It was a long time ago. I've actually been using the platform since about 2005. It's great to see how this community has grown. And it's great to see everybody after a long couple of years. So great to be here. Full disclosure, I'm a digital hoarder. I am talking about list hygiene today in the context of being a digital hoarder. I have every hard drive I've ever owned in a box somewhere, thinking that one day I'll need to go through them and find a file. So maybe you're like me, and maybe we can go through this together. You'll also see that's my son, Leo. I'm a ruthless panderer as well, so that's why a picture of him is up there. And the pandering continues. So every list gets dirty. And the reason I'm talking about list hygiene today is it's a common problem I see across all of the clients that we work with. If you could raise your hand if you work on a dirty list from time to time. Anybody? Great. Lots of us here today. Hope this is helpful. Raise your hand if you've gone through a list hygiene process in the last year or two. Oh, amazing. That's great. I see some familiar faces. I see some new faces. I'd love to hear about how it went after the session. So getting dirty has consequences. List hygiene is important. There are impacts to a list that gets dirty over time. The ones that we experience the most are those weak email metrics, the increasing bounce rates, the lower open and click-through rates, increased spam accounts, spam complaints, lower deliverability rates in our account, emails missing the inbox, and very sad email marketers. And one of the pesky ones is higher account costs. But there's hope. So list hygiene is a process, it's a program, and it's a process we can follow with some regularity, and it can ensure that our list stays healthy and happy, and our email marketers as well. I also see this as an opportunity to engage different parts of an organization. Today I'm coming at this, speaking this from a very technical perspective. I usually come with a presentation that is about helping everyone use the platform in ways that we find very useful, ways that they maybe aren't considering, ways that they can show impact in their work. And that's what this presentation is going to be. I'm going to get into the weeds a little bit. I'm going to show you screens. I'm going to show you features in Engaging Networks. But at the end of it, what I want everybody to walk away from is with a resource that they can use to undertake list hygiene in your own organizations. But as I said, I see this as collaborative. This is a way for marketers, communications teams, fundraisers to work together to find ways to improve email marketing performance, but also in the context of improving every other KPI in the organization, including revenue. So what is list hygiene? List hygiene essentially is removing or suppressing inaccurate and irrelevant data in your email list, in your subscriber list. So what do you mean by inaccurate? We mean invalid emails, bounced records, spam traps, duplicate emails, not really a problem in Engaging Networks, or irrelevant data. Irrelevant data is people aren't your target audience. These is people who are low engagement. They're not responding to you. They may be inactive. They were active before and now they're not responding. But if we can suppress or remove these records, we can improve our overall email performance. And that's the end of the pandering. There are no more pictures of my son, Leo. But we are going to get into what we mean by list hygiene and how you and your organizations can undertake this process. This is something that we always start with, but what are the objectives for our list cleaning, our list hygiene process? They could be different depending on when you're doing it and who you're working with in the organization. You could be just attempting to reduce clutter in your Engaging Networks account. You could be very concerned about your email deliverability. Maybe you've seen a reduction in performance. Maybe your email metrics are starting to lag. Maybe you're not getting anything out of your email metrics anymore because they're too clouded with inactive users. It could be about list re-engagement. We're going to talk about that today. How do you take these inactive users and re-engage them for purposes of fundraising, for mobilization, and doing some analysis on what the best way forward is? Or it could be about reducing account costs. I've had clients come to me and say, hey, we're about to pay a lot more than we ever paid for our account. We know we have some inactive users in that list. What can we do about it? With any process like this, which can be, disruptive at the end of it, if you're deleting records or even suppressing records, it's really great to establish your baseline first, right? Record your benchmarks. Engaging Networks is a live document. It changes every second that somebody takes an action on your account. But getting a baseline for your performance today, before you undertake list health and hygiene, is going to help you set yourself up for what those impacts were. It's going to help you report on those impacts, and it's going to help you build what those next benchmarks are going forward. So looking at your list size, looking at your bounce rate, your spam rate, deliverability, click-through, opens, kind of iffy. I know we all talk about open rates these days. But even looking at what percentage of your list is suppressed, what percentage of your list is opted out. And Engaging Networks has great features in order to do this. So if you had your account open, you could go to data and reports, to visual reports, to email, and to overview, and see what a 12-month performance metric is for your email sending. So looking at your sends, your deliverables, you can calculate some of these metrics very easily. But all the data is really there. So the email overview screen has this information for you. So once you've established your baseline, we can kind of do a kind of simple audit. And this simple audit is something that you can do on a regular basis. It's looking at two screens and saying, oh, how are we doing like this month? The two screens that I'm the most interested in when I'm doing a simple analysis, and this is like a question, is there a problem? Should I be looking into this? Is I'll go to the emails and email suppression screen. So this screen in Engaging Networks allows you to look at a growing problem of hard or soft bounces in your account, and spam complaints. So this is a rolling 30-day metric that you can look at to see how your email program is performing. You may be concerned as if you haven't been sending that much emails, but you're seeing your spam complaints increase. That's a reason to jump in and be concerned. It also is going to show you how many emails are suppressed in your account. So Engaging Networks does a really great job of not letting you be your own worst enemy when it comes to email marketing. And they suppress emails that are hard bounced or spam complaints so that even when you do send and you build a query, if there are emails in that query that have bounced before or have received spam complaints, they will not send those emails. And that's that deliverability metric that you see. How many emails did you intend to send and how many did we actually deliver? The difference is usually around which emails were suppressed. Over time, the number of suppressed emails in your account is going to grow and grow and grow and grow. That's an area where you can start to understand that there's a list hygiene process here for us to follow. The other thing that happens over time is that users become unreachable because they've opted out of all communications from you. And this metric here, notable lists not opted in, relates to users in your account who do not have any active consent, any opt-in checked as Y. And that's another list of growth. So if they're not reachable by email, where else are they reachable? And we're going to help answer that question today. So that's one simple audit that anyone can do in a couple minutes, something you should look at on a regular basis. Another way to look at this is through email engagement scoring. So this is a feature in Engaging Networks. It was introduced a few years ago that helps you understand, for your email marketing purposes, where your segments, where your users are at. And each score represents a kind of different behavior over the last few months. It's a rolling metric. It calculates all the time, looking at a kind of scale of engagement. Now, the thing about this is it only relates to email, right? So it only relates to actions that have occurred from email metrics. So somebody has opened an email, clicked an email, or converted from an email. This does not take into account users that have come from social media and taken an action, users that are recurring donors to you, users that have made a gift to you but not through email. So it's not an overall look at inactive users, it just relates to those email metrics, but it is a good indicator. So generally, I'm looking at list health, I'm looking at who's falling under score 11. So if I look at score 11, it says all remaining opted-in constituents, so people who are reachable, created more than 12 months ago. So users who are over 12 months old but haven't had any email engagement in the last 12 months. So that number is a number of users where I could be like, okay, there's a growing list of users in score 11. I can reach them by email, they're opted in, I'm sending emails to these people, but they're not responsive. They haven't been responsive in 12 months. Now, again, responsive by email. They could have still been doing all this other stuff, so don't count them out yet. So that's the kind of simple audit that anyone could do now using 2 screens in Engaging Networks to kind of get a list health metric, a benchmark for your organization. Another thing that we recommend, and this is a separate process, is to build out an engagement profile for your users. So every organization I've worked with defines engagement very differently. Engaging Networks is an engagement-focused platform. It's really good at tracking engagement. It creates transactional records for every behavior a user does in the platform. If they click on a link, click on a page, take an action, make a donation, make a recurring gift, there's a transactional record of all of that. So it's very good at engagement profiling. And what I recommend is that everybody define what engagement is for you. And the best way to do that is through the Data and Reports Profiles tool. Profiles in Engaging Networks allow you to do a number of different things. They allow you to capture an audience or a segment based upon a number of behaviors. And when we build an engagement profile, what we're trying to do is we're trying to stack up all the possibilities of what we consider to be engagement. So for email activity, did they click through any email in the last 2 years? Did they open any email in the last 365 days? Did they complete any data capture activity in the last year, or fundraise or make a donation, any donation of any amount in the last year? Are they a current recurring or monthly donor? If I build this engagement list, I can now isolate who in my account, regardless of email performance, I consider to be engaged. I can use that for a number of purposes. I can use that for targeting. I can use that for reporting. I can use that for analysis. But I can also use it to find out who's not engaged. So I can do the inverse with this list. If I know who's engaged, now I know who's not engaged. So it's another way for me to get that data. The other thing I want to do is I want to understand who my opt-in audience is. We all have a number of different opt-ins in our accounts, right? We have our master opt-in, we have events, we have maybe peer-to-peer, we have very specific purpose opt-ins. I want to build an understanding of like who is reachable in my account. Maybe I'm only emailing this person once a month because it's the only time we send out an email. Or maybe I'm reaching them like only every 8 months because they're a current monthly donor. Whatever it is, if I can build an understanding of who is reachable, then I can compare a couple things. So using the same profile tool, I'm going to add questions. I'm going to say, are they in my events advocacy list, maybe they're in my like reduced list where I'm only sending them an email once every 6 months. But as long as they have an active consent, I want to track that. The key thing here is with both of these profiles is I'm using the or condition, right? The or condition means that they have to meet one of these properties. They don't have to meet all of them. If I was using the and condition between these, it means that that user has to meet all of these conditions, and that's going to be a much smaller list. But I'm trying to build the biggest possible list here. So we have a couple pieces of information. I said it was going to get complicated, and that's why this is going to be available for you to download and try this yourself. But we just built two very important profiles, and I want to show you the power of them. So we're going to do an export, and this is just for us to get a number. We're going to find out who the least engaged people on our list are. I'm going to create a new export, go to Data and Reports, Export, New Query. We're going to add all of our users to the top of the universe. Just that one simple thing. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to add our opt-in profile to the filter. That's in green. So only looking at people who are opted in. And we're going to add our engaged supporters to exclude. So we're going to take all of our users, focus on only people who are reachable by email, and then we're going to exclude engaged users. And what are we left with? Anybody? Our inactive users. These are the people at the end of this query who are not active through email, through donations, through advocacy, through any tracked engagement on engaging networks that's useful for us. They have done jack all. And we've set some time parameters to this too. So they could be inactive for a year, they could be inactive for 2 years. It's up to us to define what that is. But this is our most inactive list. Everybody at the end of this we're not reaching them by email. So we can preview that export and we can get a metric, we can get that number, and we can also do some analysis. So what do we know now? We know at the end of this step, this process, which really, at the end of the day, could probably take you an hour to do, the number of suppressed emails because of hard bounces and spam complaints. We know the number of supporters who are not opted in and not reachable by email. And we've created a profile of reachable supporters, but who are inactive. Now, remember, at the end of the day, this inactive supporters list, these are the ones messing with your email. These are the ones you are sending emails to, but aren't responding. So these are the ones when you're seeing suppressed metrics that are affecting those metrics. Everyone else on this list, A and B, they're already suppressed. We're not reaching them by email. So they're the ones we're interested in. So there's a process that we can follow. Again, it's provided here step by step because I want everybody to be able to follow this on their own and their own pace at their own time to do some further analysis. So we've built this interesting profile. We now know who our most inactive users are, but they were once active. They were once donors, activists, they attended events. And really when we're thinking about what to do next, we're thinking about, well, who are these people? So you can do this with your inactive supporters, you can do this with your suppressed supporters as well, you're opted out, but we're gonna focus on these inactive supporters. We're gonna go back to building another profile, but this time we're gonna focus on these inactive supporters. This is gonna take a little bit of extra work. We have to do an export, we have to tag people in a CSV and re-upload them. But once we do, we're gonna have a profile that we can use to do some further analysis and to do some re-engagement as well down the road. So there's a 5-step process here. Again, this is 15 minutes, and I suggest everybody try this out. So what can we do with this? We just built a new inactive profile. So just like we did using the profile tools before, we can now do some profiling on this inactive list. We've isolated them. So the first thing that we can do is some benchmarking. So over the last couple of days, you've heard a lot of people talk about conditional content in emails, all of the new targeting tools that we have in email, the ability to segment an email using a profile. Remember, this is a list of people you are sending to. They are opted in, they are reachable. What we can do is we can benchmark what that looks like. This is just send one email to your master list, and then you're adding the same email to this profile to see how they're performing. And what you'll see is that they're performing horribly. They're your worst performers. You'll now have a benchmark for your best performers and your worst performers. And now you'll know the impact of what list hygiene can have on your email program going forward. It's something you can record. You only have to do it once. I talked to Engaging Networks. They said you won't have any deliverability issues if you try this. Don't do it all the time. But doing this once is not going to affect your account. It might help you understand the limitations of the performance of your inactive supporters as they're contributing today. The other thing we can do is we can suppress them. We have this list of inactive supporters. It's a profile. Profiles are used in query building for emails. Now we're going to suppress them from all communications. You can use this profile, build it on a regular basis, and suppress those users. You don't have to communicate with them going forward. They're not responding to you by email anyways. So use this profile as an exclude and don't communicate with them in the same way that you have in the past. Wrong button. The other thing we want to do with this is build a re-engagement campaign. So as I said, these inactive users, we want to focus on renewing their support for the organization. We want to renew their interest in your work, your mission, and your values. But email's not going to be the way to do it. It hasn't worked before, it's not going to work again in the future. And why do we do this? Because retaining a donor is much cheaper than acquiring one. Claire said it best in the last session around retention. And every subscriber you can reach in some way represents some level of potential future value. What else can you learn from this inactive profile? These are not an amorphous blob that refuse to open your emails. Everyone has their own reasons, their own technical reasons, their own relationship reasons with your organization, but they are your activists, donors, monthly donors, event attendees, volunteers. What was their first engagement? What brought them to your organization? What was their origin source? What was their first action? When did they make their first donation? Aside from email, how can we reach them? Do we have a full address? Do we have their phone number? Do we have SMS consent? Do we have a social media account, like a Twitter handle we can reach them at? Can we target them with ads through custom audiences? And what is the potential value in reaching them? If we can isolate this inactive list, we can also isolate their performance benchmarks as donors. We can look at their donation history. We can look at their donation frequency. When was the last date of their donation? So this profile becomes very important in doing some analysis for the potential value of re-engagement. So here's a process that you can follow, again, for analyzing this inactive donor history, right? Here's how to take that profile, use the export data tool, add the financial data to your query, and then export this as transactional data and open it up in Excel and start building some pivot tables. This will take a little bit longer to do, but once you start the practice, it's great. A couple years ago, I did a great session called Fun with Spreadsheets. It talks about how to do this type of transactional analysis. It's on the website. I'm sure Engaging Networks would be happy to share the link. That goes into doing some of this donor analysis that you can do. And again, as we start to have these conversations, it can be very technical, but imagine giving this to your fundraising team and saying, hey, I've got like a list of 500 donors here who collectively have donated thousands of dollars in the past. What can we do with them in terms of communications going forward? So what reports should you generate? The text is a little messed up here. We'll get that fixed before this goes online, but you should look at donations by time. When was the last year that our inactive list donated? You see trends, right? We see that like, oh, look, there was like 1,000 donors from 2018 who we're still reachable, we're still contacting, but they're not responding to us by email. What have we done to reach them? What can we do to renew them? By campaign, what was the campaign that they donated to? What was the issue space? By origin source, how did they come in? Did they come in through a lead gen campaign? Did they come in through digital ads? By gift level, maybe there's some donors on here who donated $1,000, $5,000 who you want to pick up the phone and just reach out to them. And failed donations by reason. So this is very interesting from recurring gifts, right? Recurring gifts stop processing for a number of reasons. Sometimes it's technical. Sometimes it's related to the payment gateway. Sometimes it's related to card expiry. But if you can build a model or a profile of users whose recurring donations stop because of those reasons, you can start to address them now and also going forward so they don't happen again. The next thing we want to do with this data is build a re-engagement communications plan, right? So I'm glossing over this part because I really want this to be a collaboration between you and other members of your team in communications and marketing. But what we've done is we've given you some analysis on what the segment by audience and potential value can be, right? So who are the key segments in this analysis that we can reach? And what is the potential value of reaching them? What is the investment we can make and what we consider to be an expected return? So we can identify also now with this data analysis that we've done, what channels will work best for re-engagement? Can we do ad targeting through custom audiences? Did they respond on social media before? They might respond again. Can we reach out through SMS or telemarketing? Is it appropriate for a mail piece? Or even email in some cases. Like I know email hasn't worked before, but maybe there's a message that we can send that we can reach because we know more about this audience. Maybe it's issue focused. Craft a compelling offer and offer something new. If you've been asking people to take actions previously or just make a donation, what other thing can we put in front of them that's new, that's different, that reaches them based upon the information that we have about them? Personalize it. We have a lot of information about the previous behavior. Use that in the presentation of this offer and experiment. This is probably the lowest kind of like, the lowest risk you have of experimenting and failing is with this list. So try anything. Try something new. Be creative. And finally, say farewell. So if you've done all this, you've gone through your re-engagement, you've looked at this, but there really isn't a path forward for these folks, it's time to remove them from your list. So once your re-engagement campaigns are complete, send out one last email notification offering one last chance to stay engaged. And if the user doesn't respond in a certain amount of time, they can be permanently suppressed, unsubscribed, or deleted. Be creative with how you do this. I love a good goodbye email. I love a good subject line. We do this all the time in our automations that prevent people from becoming lapsed, to get their attention, to get their re-engagement, to get their recommitment. If you're doing this as a part of list hygiene, it's kind of a little bit different because you've done a lot to recapture them at this point. But it doesn't mean there isn't going to be a relationship in the future. So what you say then is pretty important. Now, the controversial act of deleting data from engaging networks. So we've reached the end of the line here. Accounts that are inactive or suppressed or opted out may be candidates for deletion from engaging networks. Big point here, make sure they're not current recurring donors. Don't delete those because this is an irreversible process. I told you I was a data hoarder, right? So I'm giving you this from the perspective of a data hoarder. Removing data from engaging networks removes the supporter information, all of the transactional information as well. Some of the reports aren't going to be affected. Those calculations will remain. But whenever you try to do an export and do your own work, those transactions will not be included. This is good for GDPR, not so great for data hoarders. And this may have implications for CRM syncs. You may have a CRM that syncs to your engaging networks account. You delete something and the next day it shows back up. That's very possible. So understand what those relationships are. Is data being pushed into engaging networks? Does deleting it not have any effect? Just make sure you understand those implications first. And you can back up data. So you can do exports of transactional data, of question data, of supporter data, keep it offline, keep it in a separate database for analysis later. As a data hoarder, I really appreciate that. But at the end of the day, if you don't have to worry about your growing account, suppression is sometimes better than deletion. You never know when a user is going to return to you. So if a user returns to you and they've been deleted, it's like they're starting the relationship from scratch. If they're just suppressed and they return to you, you still have all that rich history for you to communicate with them going forward. So a couple last things. Don't let the garbage in. This is the best advice for keeping good data hygiene. Use tools like bounceless.io or Tidy Contact from Foresight to prevent spam and accounts from reaching your account. There is a presentation we did last year called Automating Engagement. Check that out. It talks about ways that you can prevent people from falling into your lapsed or inactive list through the marketing automation tools in engaging networks. And make projections, right? Make projections of what you can invest on re-engagement and retention, right? Everyone's talking about acquisition, and I'll say it again, so much cheaper to retain your donors, invest in retention, and get help from us if you need it. Contact us. You can always reach me at sayhello@grassriots.com. There's a bit.ly to set up a meeting if anybody'd like, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ryan.
Thank you, everybody.
Nice job, man. So we got a couple questions that came in, and I was reading this set of articles on the airplane ride on the way up.
Okay.
Thought we could have a nice little conversation here.
Great.
If that works for you. All right, so first question, when is the best time to send out a re-engagement campaign? During the low fundraising times, at high fundraising times? What do you think?
That's a very interesting question. We are not during high fundraising times. You're busy. Don't do that at your end. I think the key thing here is, like with re-engagement, is you can always include these segments in different activities. So one of the favorite things for us to do is to use them as custom audiences, custom audience matches in like Meta, right? They have a lot of previous behavior in your account that can be used for targeting, but also for lookalike audiences. So they can grow. If you're doing broad targeting for like an acquisition campaign or a fundraising campaign, these are still very valid audiences in terms of generating that reach and getting that larger targeting done. So when it comes to when to focus on re-engagement, it really depends on the strategies that you're going to use. If you're trying to automate systems for re-engagement, then they're kind of always on anyways. But if you're running a campaign that might be like SMS or telemarketing focused, I think it's really about fitting it into your annual program. So you don't need to do this in any kind of like parallel process. If it's just focused on like, hey, we have these lists of previously engaged donors that we want to reach out to by phone, working with your telemarketing vendor to find the right time in your overall annual program is probably best. Yeah.
So say someone becomes inactive, however you qualify someone.
Sure.
And that's one of the things, that was one of the questions that came through. Every organization is going to have a different definition for what inactive means based off how frequently you send things and kind of what your strategy is. So that's a hard question to ask, whoever asked that. But once you do it, is there a tier of how you would start? Would you first run them through an automated marketing campaign to try and get them re-engaged, and then maybe move to a texting campaign, and then move to a telemarketing campaign, and have like a hierarchy like that?
Again, I think the analysis that works very well, it has to come back to what the potential value is. Every one of those strategies has a cost. And if the cost of executing those strategies increases because you're adding volume to it, more calling, you want to limit it to just the folks where that potential value can be returned. So they have to fit the profile of your audience. They have to fit the profile of somebody who has a history of giving in your organization, a level of giving that's sufficient. Maybe they've given multiple times. And also you have to have something compelling to say to them. If they don't fit into those dynamics, they shouldn't be enrolled in any of those campaigns. There's probably a mass amount within an inactive list that can receive more broad communications. So they could be on social media, is much cheaper to target them, much more than like SMS and phone calling. So it is really capturing like which value fits into which channel and where the most effective conversion can happen that isn't going to be over email.
Is there a benefit to deleting an email from engaging networks instead of just having to be suppressed?
Yeah, reducing again, like you're asking a data hoarder. So the cost is a big one. Yeah. Organizations that we see where every 10,000 or so records, there's slight increases.
50,000.
50,000 now. Okay, I'm
50,000.
So old. It used to be 10,000.
Yeah.
But 50,000 records. Once you start reaching those account size changes, if they are just ultra lapsed and ultra disengaged, yeah, I think there's a real especially because you have CRMs, you have different systems where that data might live, and it's fine for it to be there. It doesn't have to be on engaged networks.
Right.
Delete them.
And I think one of the things that I could see you have a director of fundraising, you have who's trying to report up, and you have to report up like, oh, our total list shrank over the last 2 quarters, right? And I think that can be a hard thing, and that might have to be a more long-term conversation that you're in with your vice president of marketing or with your board of like, here's why we are targeting the people that we're going to target. So we're not going to be reporting to you just our overall list size, because I could just keep growing that and keep inflating that. What I want to be is, who are the active people? And I want to see that kind of growth over time. And I think I've started to see the shift that direction, but I think it's still a bit of a lagging thing.
Yeah, I'll share a story, a nightmare scenario. About 10 years ago, I was doing an implementation for engaging networks. And we were killing it. It was going so well. It was a large list, like over 3 million users. And we worked with the client before the migration to do list hygiene, right? And we set up what we think an engagement profile is. We use that as our benchmark for who to import and who not to import. And we gave them the information. Everyone agreed this is right. We did the work, and the next thing we heard was, why are there only 500,000 people in Engaging Networks? We have a list of 3 million. And we had shown the data, but we hadn't really talked through it. And we backed everything up, so we were able to import everybody, but it was that kind of reaction, which is it's like, oh, we haven't been looking at this before. It's not something we've measured. We wanted to do it now, but like the impacts are a little scary from our bottom line perspective. You know, I think you're right though, that behavior is changing. We're moving away from vanity metrics. We're moving towards impact, and this is one way to do that.
And I think, as a company who is trying to be a solid technology partner for folks, we also want to kind of push you towards best practices when it comes to thinking about your technology stack throughout, like not just Engaging Networks. Engaging Networks is a broader piece of an entire ecosystem that you're utilizing both services and products. And we want to make sure that we're kind of letting you get to those really positive places with your data.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like the tools show for it. I mean, I was able to do that by going into the platform and showing off some of the things that you have that, we don't get elsewhere.
And I think one of the things that you're getting to, and that's why I brought the book up because I was reading about it. So there's this idea of a single source of truth, right? And then I was reading this book, and it was talking about multiple versions of the truth. And then you can have both a single source of truth structure and a multiple versions of truth, right? And so your CRM is going to be that single source of truth. That's where your data really needs to be pristine and clean and structured. But for your marketing team, it might make a lot of sense to have a different version of that truth. And that might be inside of Engaging Networks, or that might be inside of whatever you're kind of utilizing that way. And I think that's a way that you can kind of bridge this difference between data hoarding, because there are some real benefits to having all that data for a really long time, right? Especially if you're looking like, oh, I wish we still had those 1 million records to do some like big data like analysis on, right? And now you don't have it, versus how do you store that like long term? And that can be where you can maybe balance those two.
Yeah, and I have a very different experience than most people because I grew up on Engaging Networks. And it always has been the marketing and fundraising and advocacy platform to me. It's never been the CRM. And I've never tried to make it be the CRM.
We don't want to be a CRM.
Yeah, and you don't. And I've brought it up many times. But I think that's like, that helps me do my job better, not having to be the CRM. And to let the CRM deal with the CRM stuff. So yeah, this is another kind of piece. I brought that up, deleting records, CRM integrations can be a challenge. But at the end of the day, having a clean account where you can rely on the metrics that you're getting from Engaging Networks to give you insight into what to do next, that's really the power.
And one more thing, I'm just throwing this on you here. So it also came out of here, and it talks about elements of data strategy. And it talks about identifying whether you're a defensive organization when it comes to your data strategy or an offensive, right? And the key objectives of a defensive organization is to ensure data security, privacy, integrity, quality, regulatory compliance, and governance. And on the offensive side is to improve competitive position and profitability. And I think a lot of people may need to start to think about it in that way. I think you're not one or the other. It's a continuum. And where do you sit in that offensive and defensive position?
Yeah, and how they like benefit both sides, right? Because when you think about this hygiene process, and what I'm trying to get across is this is not just a technical endeavor here. It's not just about what the performance of the CRM. It's about what you can do to grow your program with audiences that have already engaged with you. It's about that re-engagement strategy, and that's going to be a cross-functional project.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Ryan.
Thank you, Ben. Thank you, everybody.